the ninth day of August's Nagasaki anniversary, and it's 2023. It's 78 years of studying the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki like they're literally human lab rats. We got a poll to help articulate it. Was it evil for the nuclear industry to rebuild Nagasaki in a nuclear bomb crater so they can have human lab rats? And you'll see a bunch of studies tonight that'll quantify that assertion. Welcome to the madness. It's the only show on nuclear worldwide. There's not even like a propaganda show that does 5 days a week, which is all the media, I guess, but like there's no dedicated show on nuclear on the entire planet. This is the only one, and it's the right one. It's curb stomp nuclear every day. So, I was on the go a lot today and back and forth. And so I decided, they took down my other site, my other YouTube channel that I had for like 14 years or something. And there's a whole bunch of Nagasaki, Hiroshima studies are now disappeared. So I went back into the archive and pulled out some stories. And then we got some fresh academic studies from today. We got also got stories from 2019, 2020, maybe 2021, where we done shows, presentations, and shows on the anniversary sometimes. Did you know an unknown number of survivors from Hiroshima bombing had made their way to Nagasaki, where they were bombed again 3 days later? This is one of the people. In 1945, a man survived the atomic blast at Hiroshima, dragged himself to an air raid shelter, spent the night, caught the morning train, arrived at his job on time in Nagasaki, where he survived another atomic blast. Nuclear industry probably has him as a poster child. So, the radioactive fallout, you're picking up hundreds of millions of tons of humans and animals and buildings and everything else. You're atomizing and aerosoling, ionizing and radiating it. Releasing it into a massive plume of ionizing. That's an ionized cloud of radioactive fallout that was measured worldwide. Dana, by the way, Dana Nasana's picked up the slack tonight. Thanks, Dana. I forgot to put up my phone number, 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406 on your screen. And it's also in the comments section. Okay. U.S. Energy Secretary visits New York City to make nuclear cool again. That was on the anniversary. And that's his grandfather right there, I think. And his mom. This was 2018, I believe, this particular story. It's been 2 years since New York State Public Service Commission approved $8 billion in subsidies to keep the state's nuclear plants open. And Peary had said you can't have a legitimate conversation about this globe and its environment without being a supporter of nuclear power. But nuclear power is the problem that we are facing, this global warming from 80 years of emissions. And it all started, the big bang, so to speak, no pun intended, was Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Nagasaki was a plutonium bomb. We got a bunch of studies on that coming up. Lots of good stuff. Japan, if there's such a thing in this topic, of course. Japan urged, there's a lot of truth, a lot of facts, a lot of documentation, a lot of clear thinking. Japan urged to remember its atrocities in World War II. Japan was actually occupying North Korea for the last 50 years up to that point. So they had to leave. So United Nations was like, a victim at our fingertips. So they went in and dropped more munitions in World War II on little tiny North Korea. They napalmed every community, every little village, every city, burnt it to the ground. And now the official 70-year anniversary this year of isolating North Korea from the rest of the entire planet. Administration after administration after administration worldwide has participated for United Nations. That was the United Nations peacekeeping mission that for 70 years ostracized an entire race of people. Land, sea, and air embargoes and impoverished them, turned them into the boogeyman that has never attacked anybody in the last 120 years. Nagasaki observes a 73rd A-bomb anniversary. That is 2018. So they got radiation poisoning at 3 to 5 kilometers, but that wasn't acknowledged. And the victims from the so-called black rain, I actually got a picture of that coming up that slipped past my brain, and I was looking at pictures. I was like, my goodness, that's black rain falling out. Nagasaki mayor calls for Japan to join UN nuclear weapons. UN? They are the weapons on the planet, for goodness sakes. And it's taken how long? 80 years to ratify it. Dead bodies everywhere. And how a song about an A-bombing of Nagasaki found a voice in Italy. That's 2018. And that looks like it's Photoshopped to me. But it could be real. I don't think it is, though. Hiroshima bomber tasted lead after nuclear blast. Rediscovered Enola Gay recording revealed the Hiroshima bomb tasted lead. And they said that was a good thing because he knew the bomb worked, I think he says. 40 years after they were apparently lost, and 73 years after the aircraft dropped the first atomic bomb used in warfare, now they just, instead of bombs, they use depleted uranium. Dirty bombs. The transcript records Paul Tibbett, the pilot of the B-29 Superfortress, stating the mission was shrouded in secrecy. Yeah, that's never stopped. And that the crew had been issued with handguns and cyanide tablets in case they were shot down. Yeah, well, you can't give away the disgusting government secret. We want you to kill yourself, so. Tibbets also said he had a taste like lead in his mouth the instant the bomb detonated above the city, and he was on a plane flying away. Now, they were hit by the concussion twice. Look what he says. I got the brilliance. I tasted, I could taste it. It tasted like lead. Because my lead in his fillings in his teeth. So that's radiation, see? So I got this lead taste in my mouth. That was a big relief. I knew she had blown. Getting irradiated was a big relief. Yeah, well, now we don't got to take the cyanide pills, Dana. Batshit crazy. And this was because the fillings in my teeth, so that the radiation, see? As I got the lead taste in my mouth, and that was a big relief. And out she'd blowed. And you got poisoned, and your children got poisoned, and their children got poisoned. Now, this wasn't official caricature. This was somebody's symbolic depiction. They painted on the wall and made a symbol. Pretty brilliant, actually. Japan will not join the nuclear ban treaty, says Shinzo Abe. Oh, we don't got to worry about Shinzo Abe no more. He got killed with a homemade gun. I still love that picture and videos. He was such a scumbag. Nobody deserved it more than him. He murdered just probably 1 billion people worldwide with radioactive food. Once it goes that high, it's spreading far and wide. Here it now, so it's not like a meltdown where it's constantly hemorrhaging. A bomb is an instant billionth of a second, and it sucks up 1 million tons of whatever is closest. In this case, it was houses and horses and dogs and chickens and children and women and mailmen and everything else. And they turned into atoms, the physical ionized radiated atoms. So you had humans that were ionized and radiated, and when they're breathed in by other humans decades later, they get sick and die eventually from it. Einstein said if he had understood what the whole story, he would have never came forward with the E equal MC squared. A little girl and her mother pray in front of a cenotaph for A-bomb victims at the Peace Memorial Park in Hiroshima in a nuclear wasteland. So they're in a nuclear wasteland. I can't wrap my common sense around that one for some reason. Was it evil for the nuclear industry to rebuild Nagasaki in a nuclear bomb crater just so they can have human lab rats? I think it was. So is the stream okay? Because I'm getting a warning. Please configure primary and backup streams correctly. I haven't done anything unusual. Everything is normal. Please configure, right, so there shouldn't be anything there on the, like when I started was the usual excellent connection. I can't change that during a stream. I'm streaming. So I'm just going to wait, make sure the stream is okay. Everything's fine, James? Thank you. Maritime Slave, thank you. Okay, let's keep going. They're tying with us by the looks of it. But I'll get a new stream key for the next show tomorrow night. I'll go back to that for a second. I didn't cover that. Yeah, a little girl and her mother pray in front, and they're in a nuclear wasteland. Now, so what happens? They didn't really study it for the first couple of years at all. They rebuilt it. So you're going to come in after you rebuild on a nuclear bomb crater and then use that statistics, right, because everything is dug up or buried somewhere else or is deep below the foundations of the roads and the sidewalks. The original land, right, was dramatically changed. You should have done the studies right away. And so the issue is the studies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are used to justify nuclear worldwide. They're using those statistics that are completely dishonest, disingenuous, as benchmarks for cancers and other things. See? And it's very dishonest and evil. It's actually evil. What to do what they're doing, that's actually evil. And then to build the cities back on the nuclear bomb crater. So if Russia and Ukraine has a nuclear war, does anybody think they're going to build a city in one of these bomb craters in the future? Of course not, right? But so it's an extra act of cruelty to do that for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's contempt, right, to do that. The Hiroshima anniversary, 5 things you should know about nuclear weapons today. It doesn't even matter. 73, that was 73 years, it's 78 years now. Commitments to arms control is fading. It's the same old story everywhere you look, right? Just lots and lots of propaganda. The imprint of the public consciousness of atomic bombing has faded greatly. Well, that wasn't an accident. You didn't even study it till years later. But yet you use the statistics then to justify more nuclear. The anniversary arrives at a time when the nuclear enterprise in the United States is gearing up to spend more than $1 trillion on nuclear missiles, nuclear bombers, nuclear submarines over the next few decades. Nuclear weapons are becoming too provocative to test, so they switch to depleted uranium munitions. So think of a bomb as 50, the current bombs they might use at 50 kilograms of plutonium uranium. And then think about hundreds of thousands of tons of dirty bombs that they're now using all over Ukraine. All over Ukraine. So you're going to fight a nuclear war with dirty bombs, what they call depleted uranium munitions, but it's gone through a chain reaction. So everything is radioactive, period. And you can't purify this stuff. And so when they say that it's just uranium-238, it's completely dishonest. It's gone through a chain reaction. All the other isotopes are going to be there. So we're fighting nuclear wars, but it's called dirty bombs, depleted uranium munitions. And both America and United Kingdom are unloading their current inventories to the Ukrainians and giving them weapons that fire these dirty bombs at high rates of speed. And they're pyrophoric, where they catch fire as they're going through the air, and they liberate the radiation into the drinking water, the farmers' fields, the communities, and everything else that they touch. A group of Japanese high school students have been recreating 1945 Hiroshima attack in VR. Well, this is the picture of the black rain falling. See the black streaks on them all? Now, this was quite a ways away from Hiroshima, so I don't know if it's real or not. But it's a very intriguing picture, right? The 2-year effort produced a 5-minute virtual reality experience. They're talking about a group of Chinese or Japanese students. It took them 2 years to produce a 5-minute virtual reality of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where a loud blast destroyed buildings and smoke rises from crackling fires under a darkened sky. Users can view business and buildings that once stood prior to the blast. And Japan Times, let me see. So again, you're going into a nuclear wasteland to take a picture. To me, it's madness because when you look at the studies, there's still lots of radiation to conceive about in your drinking water, your water tables, the reservoirs and stuff like this. You can't get rid of it, right? Grandchildren of the Habakusha, which are the victims, but not everybody was in the fallout was considered the so-called Habakusha, which was their own name, right? It was almost a slur in one way. And the B-29 crewmen unite the press for nuclear-free world. The granddaughter of a survivor of atomic bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the grandson of the only U.S. serviceman who flew on both atomic bomb missions, have recognized each other's peace activities and share the determination to call for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Well, you got to get rid of nuclear power plants. They can't make any more weapons. So that's a pretty good start. And you haven't got them things hemorrhaging into your environment. Witnessing devastation in Hiroshima, survivors retell their story 73 years. Witnessing devastation, the survivors retell. Well, the problem is they're at a lot of them are at around 80 years of age now, the survivors. If they were born 1 or 2 years old, rather, they're around 80 years old now. And so they've been ostracized and they weren't entitled to people, they had like a line in the sand. If you were on one side of it, suffering from acute radiation illness, you didn't exist. They wrote you off. And last year, or the year before, Suga, Prime Minister at that time was named Suga, decided not to go ahead with an appeal to the Supreme Courts, which is what they normally do, for victims who were seeking health care after all these years and were denied. Their own victims, their own people. And the majority of them died in agony. See? Many injured survivors languished for weeks and months, and for many that survived the initial blasts, radiation sickness and cancer like leukemia slowly crept through their bodies. Nagasaki survivor visits the U.S. town that fueled his city destruction, which is Hanford. Not all of it came from Hanford, but most of it came from Hanford. The fuel is what I'm talking about, obviously. The plutonium. Degenerate UN chief visits Nagasaki. UN chief, we got the whole world, we got Hollywood in particular for since the internet, UN, because UN was, before that it was the League of Nations, before Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And after Nagasaki, they changed their name to United Nations. But what they are is currently there are 195 militaries, and they've taken over your planet. Oh, and it's by scumbag Mari Yamaguchi. And it's propaganda, right? So you downplay the numbers. Whenever you see Mari Yamaguchi, she's in a very powerful position, apparently, because her stories are dictating the narrative for the next years. For all medias worldwide will regurgitate her narrative. And so Mari Yamaguchi, I went to her Twitter account and I just lit one word there, monster. And she blocked me, obviously. And it's probably the first time anybody ever called her a monster, too. Nagasaki mayor calls for a security policy independent of nuclear weapons. So Nagasaki Mayor should have been calling for the evacuation of a nuclear wasteland. Grandchildren of the Habakusha and B-29 crewmen unite to press for a nuclear-free world. And we just covered that. Let's jump on some studies for a bit. Global transport rates of cesium and 239-240 plutonium from Nagasaki in the Canadian Arctic ice cores. But officially, nothing got out of there. It's probably all in 1,000 tanks like Fukushima. Global transport rate of, which is a pun, right? Global transport rate of cesium, 239-240 plutonium originated from Nagasaki A-bomb in 45. Let me just done it. I have to go to the other screen, am I? Excluding the amount fissioned from the explosion and deposited as local fallout are deposited evenly throughout the northern hemisphere. Evenly throughout the northern hemisphere. 67% of the expected amount of cesium that reached the Arctic, while 1.11% of the plutonium reached the Arctic. Where'd the rest of it go? The results suggest that different transport mechanisms exist for various contaminants in the global transport system. It doesn't work that way. Like, all the atoms are the same size, right? Unless you're dealing with unbelievably sophisticated microscopes. So you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. So to suggest that 500 of them might be influenced by the weather pattern, and it's ludicrous to suggest. It's ludicrous. The Nagasaki local fallout region is also less urbanized than Hiroshima region, and therefore a few undisturbed sampling locations remain. That's what I was talking about earlier, where the city was rebuilt, and they never done studies till after. And then they're using that as the bar for safe radiation levels worldwide in communities and everything else, and your oceans and lakes and rivers and streams and everything, you name it. And you can't use Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? It was a nuclear. We've had nuclear bombs all over the world detonated. We don't need Nagasaki, because Nagasaki, you know what I'm saying, to know what's really going on. The whole story is so sad of how evil the nuclear industry actually really was and is and continues to be. Distribution of the nuclear bomb's plutonium in Nishiyama area, Nagasaki, estimated by accurate and precise determination of 240-239 plutonium ratio in soil. It's 2007. The two isotopes in particular, the 239 plutonium is 24,000 year half-life. The 240 plutonium is 6,500 year half-life, so there's 10 half-lives. Are the most abundant of the plutonium isotopes in the environment. And the 240-239 plutonium ratio is known to be related to the source of the contamination. However, there is only a limited volume of quality data available on the levels of distribution of 239 and 240. This is 2007, remember? In the environment, since traditional alpha spectrometry cannot separate the two isotopes. They drown each other's signals out. They're not gonna be separate. They travel together, right? So you can quantify it by utilizing both of the names. Then he says the ratio observed in Japan's soils were usually unusual or usually in the range of global fallout. I hate academics. At the time of the detonation of the plutonium nuclear weapon over Nagasaki City, radionuclide contaminated rain, so-called black rain, was deposited on the Nishiyama area, about 3 kilometers east of the hypocenter. Well, when you look at the plumes, I'll bring up a picture for you. When you look at these plumes, to suggest that this is only going to have a 3-kilometer ratio, and we're talking huge numbers, but it's a flash event, but it picks up 100 million tons, whereas a nuclear meltdown is just producing, and so are fuel pools. You're just producing isotopes constantly. However, the data for the ratios are rather scarce, and there are only limited studies describing the present situation of contamination after 60 years from the bombing. 60 years. But there's so many studies, like there's 4.3 million studies in North America produced every year. And the majority of them are sequestered beyond a paywall by Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, the 3 biggest journals on the planet, who have a combined total of 22,000 journals. So people might go out and read some of the journals and say, well, I got a good handle on it, but you'd be surprised what's hid away beyond the closed doors of the other journals. Some of these science sections, you got to pay $50,000 just to peruse the science section of the journals. Not to rent or buy the studies, but just to get in there and look around. It's dishonest. And I got a study on plutonium. Let's look at that one. Seems they want to be so freaking dishonest. Where can that study be? Score. So, beagle dogs and beagle puppies, 144 beagle dogs were given a single inhalation of plutonium-238. Death from the radiation occurred about 1.5 to 5.4 years after exposures. And tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, and the liver occurred beginning about 3 years. You've got typically 3 tumors: the lung, the skeleton, the bones, and the liver, occurred beginning 3 years later. Bone tumors in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death. Lung tumors found in 46 dogs were the second most common cause. And liver tumors in 20 dogs were found in 20 dogs, but the cause of death in only 2 dogs occurred later than tumors in the bones and the lungs. So the first tumors are going to show up are going to be the bone tumors. And for children, that means mutated stem cells. So they might die of other diseases before that manifests or gets diagnosed. Tumors of these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal were competing causes of deaths, and the findings in the dogs suggest that similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed. Well, dogs' livers are 50 times more efficient at filtering plutonium than a human's liver, which means a human is 50 times more vulnerable than the dogs. And by the way, curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods, curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium isotopes. And curium isotopes is the biggest byproduct in the radiated nuclear fuel rods. They're hemorrhaging those isotopes into your environments from over 400 fuel pools worldwide. It never goes away. It'll be here long past the human experience. Forest soils rich in organic materials tend to retain radionuclides for a long time. It doesn't matter if you do, because you can't even if you have a forest fire, you can't destroy the isotopes. You can just liberate them back into the environment. The concentrations of plutonium derived from global fallout in Japanese forest soils were unusually higher than those in the open field soils, because the trees will suck up the radiation like it does with nutrients rather. Mental health consequences of 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Are the grandchildren of people living in Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the drop of the atomic bomb more vulnerable? Are the grandchildren of the victims in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Well, they're going to grow up with that stigma deeply embedded in their mind, but their immune systems are going to be compromised because they grew up in a nuclear wasteland. Like, it's not a heavy nuclear wasteland, but it's a nuclear wasteland known as low-level radiation, but it's real stuff, right? Your body doesn't have an immune trigger to defend against it. Impact of radiation exposure on the prognosis of myelodysplastic syndromes in Nagasaki atomic bomb survivors. And basically a whole bunch of health issues. So your blood cells are dysfunctional, which means you're producing a massive amount of white blood cells. So you have to be lethargic. You get difficult in breathing. You get pale skin, frequent infections, easy bruising and bleeding. Which means basically your immune system is compromised, so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless to the average population. The Nagasaki atomic bomb survivors' tumor tissue bank. Every time I hear the word tissue bank, I think of that hideous, disgusting creature who does the peer review on a lot of these studies and dismisses them. What's her face from the United Kingdom? Miss Evil herself. The monster herself. I thought it was right there. Oh, it is. This is Jerry Thomas in the United Kingdom. She should be arrested immediately for crimes against humanity. She has an amazing education, and her job is to cut your throat with propaganda.
So, for example, coming here, I would have...
She's talking about flying to Fukushima to do that presentation. And she says, for example, flying there got a bigger dose.
Coming here, I would have got a dose of 0.07 millisieverts on the flight. And I actually went round Fukushima Daiichi on Wednesday, and the dose that I had going around the site, so very close to where the reactors are, it was 0.01, and probably lower, but that's the lowest it could actually read. So I got more of a dose flying here, and we'll get a dose tomorrow when I fly home, than I would have done from being in Fukushima.
What a scumbag. What a horrific monster. I was going to say at the beginning of the show, rather, that Maui is burning. People are... it's an unprecedented fire. They got 80-mile-per-hour winds. Everything's tinder dry. We talked about this a few weeks ago because the ocean is so hot. When you get a storm going over, it's going to accelerate. And if you get it happening when there's forest fires, it's going to be out of control, and it is. And Hawaii is full of... the forests have sequestered a lot of radiation. And so... there's huge plumes coming out of that place, but holy smokes, the fire is just raging. And there are videos of people having to jump into the ocean to escape the fire. That's just terrifying. My heart goes out to everybody. Analysts internal plutonium radiation exposure, and so they studied man-made anthropogenic radiation worldwide. more than all the natural elements from the solar system, because man-made is not natural. It's not created by the solar system. And so that's really saying something. In fact, the majority of studies are done worldwide by the nuclear industries, particularly North America. There's 4.3 million studies each year, the majority of them for the nuclear industry. They're really, truly disgusting. If you put that manpower, brain power behind geothermal for like 2 weeks, everybody could have free dirt cheap geothermal for the next thousands of years. Because the only puzzle to crack is pretty simple, just the drilling bits. And they're able to do it different ways now, right? But I did see one comment or mention, let me go back, open it up, was suggesting or asking the question, was Hawaii's a directed energy weapon? Well, it doesn't need a directed energy weapon for Maui, but I'm not saying it's not, though, because you can't put anything past this industry, and directed energy weapons are unbelievably real, folks. I'm sure all you fine, wonderful folks are aware of that already, but they come a long way since 9/11. That was used at 9/11, right? There was radiation doses received. Get a load of this. Just it gives you more examples of how they used the victims. Rebuilt the city on a nuclear bomb crater, which is why I got a poll tonight. Radiation doses received by Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bomb survivors has been evaluated from data related only to external exposure, because there's no reliable evidence for internal exposures in the atomic bomb victims. Imagine somebody actually saying that. Imagine, so these people, you see their names up there? They're paying their mortgages, with this kind of propaganda. To suggest that, and so the exposures are about external exposures. That's another reason you would want to use. But this is what they're doing. They are using this stuff worldwide to justify new nuclear facilities, for fuel facilities be put right in the communities and stuff like this, so that nuclear power plants can be surrounded by farms. It's related only to external exposure because there's no reliable evidence for internal exposures in the atomic bomb victims. So imagine the studies are external exposures only, folks. To suggest there's no evidence for internal exposure of the atomic bomb victims. To suggest there's no evidence is so far-fetched, it's so dishonest, it's so disingenuous, it's the very epitome of evil. Like it really is evil on a whole different level. It's a coward thing that the nuclear industry does, and it excels at anything that needs a coward for some reason. In Nagasaki, about 78,000 citizens were killed by the bomb. Some of them were thrown 600 feet into the sky. The atomic bomb injuries are divided into 3 groups in accordance with the major forms of energy: atomic bomb burns, atomic bomb wounds, and atomic bomb radiation injuries, which are all radiation injuries are all external, and denied them health care now for 78 years based on a completely dishonest, on purpose dishonest study. It's weaponized against humanity. It's just what studies are. People survived after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The most scrupulous and important research of radiation impact on human beings is the research of the consequences of the nuclear explosion in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They didn't start doing the studies until after the city was rebuilt, so they didn't have a study area anymore. And they've used this, weaponized it against us when it's the most dishonest thing you could do when it comes to radiation is to claim that Hiroshima and Nagasaki, just wait for that, let me find that again. I want to grab that and put it in my what the hell file. That is so expected when it comes to nuclear industry, right? That's how they roll. If it's completely dishonest, if it's completely barbaric, they're all in, man. No one's got to twist their arms. People survived. Claiming there's no internal exposures, and that it's the most important studies that quantifies using radiation in communities. It's a failed human species. That's what the nuclear creatures are. Dispositional records of plutonium, just plutonium, and 137 cesium released from Nagasaki atomic bombs in the sediment of the reservoirs at Nagasaki. Well, every time it rains, it washes down from the mountains into the reservoirs. Fukushima's drowned out all these numbers anyway, but you gotta look at this. You really gotta look at this arrogance that these academics have. Arrogance doesn't do it justice. It's just contempt for everybody so they can get a paycheck. In a sediment core at the Nishiyama reservoir at Nagasaki City, depth profiles of plutonium's isotope ratios and cesium activity were determined. Sediment containing plutonium and cesiums were deposited immediately after a detonation of Nagasaki atomic bomb were identified in the core, which they took core samples, right? Nagasaki City, one of the oldest in the world, that was contaminated with the artificial plutonium. Well, there is no natural plutonium. Plutonium fission products like cesium were released after the Nagasaki bomb. And plutonium and cesium, which have long half-lives, are kept in the environment over long periods. No, it's kept there long past the human experience. And so analysts of internal plutonium radiation exposure to Nagasaki atomic bomb victims. So you won't see that in the official narrative. You'll see there was not enough radiation to suggest people were breathing it in or drinking it or consuming it. So it's such a dishonest, hateful, despicable thing to do to your fellow humans. The radiation doses received by Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bomb survivors have been evaluated from data related only to external exposures because there's no reliable evidence. This is an academic, by the way. There's no reliable evidence for internal exposures. Nuclear scientists like, if you see one, that's what we should get for like doormats as a nuclear scientist, so everybody can wipe their feet on it and just say, and have it white. So have a nuclear scientist in a one of their lab coats. And give that out for baby showers and everything to the people that come and give you gifts. Give them it won't take long to denigrate. Apologies. Bone sarcomas in atomic bomb survivors Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 2008. And every study you see when it gets to 2011, 12, 13, and on is going to stab you right in the face right away. Ionizing radiation-induced bone tumors have traditionally been associated with exposures to high levels of ionizing radiation. No, like, there's 1,800 diseases, not just tumors and cancers, right? The first thing they study 9 months, when you get to 9 months rather after a nuclear accident, they're going to be checking all newborns for Down syndrome and autism. Global transport of plutonium, and it's just plutonium. They don't even use numbers anymore when it comes to plutonium because it's all nasty, see? From Nagasaki to the Arctic. A review of the Nagasaki plutonium investigation. If you really want to have some nightmares, go read the plutonium files one of these days. Review the Nagasaki plutonium investigation. And Bill Clinton had initiated an investigation, opened a whole can of worms on the Americans' human radiation trials. Over 800 pregnant women were given radioactive injections and radioactive drinks and told they were vitamin drinks and vitamin shots. When the babies died prematurely, the carcasses were dug up after and given to like Argonne National Laboratory, Los Alamos National Laboratories, where they ashed the baby and sniffed it for isotopes. The highest concentrations of 239, 240 plutonium was 64.5 million becquerels. I'm not sure what the hell that is. Radiation injuries with notes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's flash through some of this stuff. UV radiation may explain intercity differences for cardiacs in A-bomb survivors. That might. But there's a whole lot of studies on that from radiation, by the way. Long-term follow-up of the atomic bomb survivors. Yeah, 78 years. Built the city, moved them all back in and studied them like lab rats nonstop. Every facet of their lives, their children's, their everybody. The lifespan study is a follow-up of atomic bomb survivors. Investigate the radiation effects and then use that to justify radiation in your community. On human health and collected data for over 60 years. Well, it didn't even start till the first couple of years later. The physical growth and development of children who survived the atomic bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They studied everything, right? They were, and that was Stanford University, scum Stanford. Results of mass screening for breast cancer and atomic bomb survivors. What are you studying that for? Radon measurements, radon, the ultimate insult, in residential housings in Hiroshima. So that one was meant to downplay it. Oh, in England, no less. Big surprise. Eyeball lesions following the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So there's a lot of ways to get lesions, but radiation was one way too. Ratio as a measure of biochemical age in Hiroshima atomic bomb survivors. I can't remember. Evaluation of adverse events in atomic bomb survivors receiving curative intent radiation therapy. So they radiate the shit out of you, and when you're dying, they hit you with more radiation. Some weird sickness right there, man. City effects in the atomic bomb survivors data. Cancer. Risk of death among the children of atomic bomb survivors after 62 years of follow-up. They study everything, don't they? Human lab rats. Risk of death of the children. Collection of tissue specimens for newly diagnosed solid cancers among atomic bomb survivors. They studied everything, folks. Statistical observation, lenticular changes in survivors of the Hiroshima bomb, clinical statistical observations, delayed effects. Yeah, because there's like a lot of latent diseases won't show up for years. The physical growth and development of children who survived atomic bombing. That was Stanford. Who survived. Scumbag Stanford will never let you down for being degenerates. Long-term follow-up of atomic bomb survivors. We've done that one. I must have skipped. Fallout melt debris, aerodynamically shaped glasses in beach sands of the Hiroshima Bay, Japan, 2019. Thoughts on the relief for atomic bomb survivors since Obama's visit to Hiroshima. It's like the whole thing is so laughable. That was 2016. Bone tumors. Feasibility using 236 uranium to reconstruct closed-in fallout disposition from Hiroshima. Well, you don't need it. Just look at any other bomb crater they made out there where they didn't rebuild their cities, and you'll have everything and then some. And type 2 diabetes, obesity, breast cancers, risk among the Japanese women atomic bomb survivors, cohorts, guinea pigs. When you hear cohorts, you're talking guinea pigs. A neutron-induced 63 nickel activity, microscopic observations. That has a long half-life, like a 100-year half-life, I think. The Nagasaki atomic bomb survivors tumor tissue bank. The stress effects, it's going to be stress. Atomic bomb long-run effects on trust. Hope after. Like, why would you build your cities back on a nuclear bomb crater? Why do that? H6 Pacific Achilles tendon reflex time in Japanese studied atomic bomb survivors Hiroshima. Because this is some of the latent stuff that they can't walk as they get older because their Achilles tendons become dysfunctional. Arthritis and gout, diabetes, etc. So when you start looking at all these studies, you start realizing all the stuff they're studying. It's not an accident, right? Cancer in Japanese exposed as children. Neutron spectrums of Hiroshima A-bomb dosimetric systems, 1986. Childhood cancer in relation to prenatal exposure to atomic bomb. Right bundle branch heart block. Heart disease predicted higher risk of pacemaker implantations if you're a survivor. Longevity in radiated human population with particular references to atomic bomb survivors. Some of these people were doing studies saying the radiation was good for them. Radiation-related leukemias and lymphoma. Speculations based primarily on experience of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Mutation research of the atomic bomb exposed population. They rebuilt the city in the nuclear wasteland and moved everybody back in. Gave them everything they needed and then studied them. And they'll probably do it for 1,000 years if they can. And we're talking a massive amount of academics making a living doing that. Restoration of the urban and their children doing it, and then their children doing the studies. Residual radiation, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Trying to utilize Hiroshima, Nagasaki as, because like, fuel rods are different from a nuclear bomb. Nuclear waste is different from a nuclear bomb again, and nuclear fuel. The nuclear emissions from the fuel pools is different from the nuclear bomb. So you can't quantify, this as the elixir of everything. Dietary factors in cancer mortality. So what they're trying to do is blame some of the massive amount of cancer on other things, and slowly whittle away. So, well, actually, it was only one cancer. But we think they might have been born with it. Learning disabilities in individuals exposed prenatally to ionizing radiation. What are you doing studies like that for? That costs a lot of money. Look at all the people sign their names on these studies, right? You study land transformation processes after atomic bombing damage. Incidences of dementia among the atomic bomb survivors. Radiation hazard areas considered a spectral analysis of the neutron components of tactical neutron bomb detonations. The physical growth and development of children who survived atomic bombing in Hiroshima. Actual lab rats, right? That's why we got to study tonight. Was it evil for the nuclear industry to rebuild Nagasaki in a nuclear bomb crater just so they can have human lab rats for hundreds of years? Hell yeah, Dana. A few pictures and a little video coming up at the end. So I was doing a lot of electrical on the boat today. I got the most important one was getting, because we had a little fire there last year. So turns out the inverter, because I got a 3,000 watt inverter, which is handy because I can charge the batteries now, right? And I was going to bring the generator out with me just so I can charge the batteries until I get another battery. But also I can charge the camera's battery, I can charge the gimbal's batteries now, I can charge the phone, I can charge the drone, everything else, right? So we got that up and running. And I put my backlight for running lights for the back of it, a white light, so nobody runs me over from behind. And I got the running lights, new running lights. I'm going to try to mount them tomorrow. I got everything taken apart on the dash of the boat. And I got power to most things again. Can't get power to the fan. The fan, you need power because if your windows get steamed up, the fan will clear it for you. Trends in the prevalence of diabetes. There's 1,800 diseases. See? And what you're seeing is a whole lot of studies on all these different diseases. Right? And what do you think they're doing all that is because they're expecting that stuff, right? Comparisons of accumulated doses in quartz and feldspar extracts from the atomic bomb exposed roofing tiles. So the roofs of the houses were highly radioactive. Cancer incidence in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1958 to 87. Critical requirement. They've done a study on literally everything. Unilateral, multiple primary tumors in atomic bomb survivors. Long-term health consequences of atomic bomb radiation. But then they're going to, which is not the same as a nuclear power plant's emission or a nuclear meltdown or the dumping in the oceans or in the estuaries or lakes or streams or rivers. It's not the same. None of these are the same. They all got incredibly different characteristics. The prolific amount of radiation comes from the fuel pools of every plant all day long into the environment. They're still splitting the atoms for 1 million homes, except now it's just released directly into the environment. Long-term health consequences of atomic bomb radiation. Dental exposure, Hiroshima, Nagasaki population. Radiation effects and cognitive functions among atomic bomb survivors exposed at or after adolescence. They study every facet. You couldn't possibly cover everything. From difficult past to the imaged future, projective reversal, transformation to ground zero, transformation. They rebuilt it on a nuclear wasteland. There is real mental health consequences later in life. So dementia and autism will explode in these areas. But children born 9 months later that are conceived after it, or during it even, you'll start to see these incredible discrepancies of Down syndrome and autism showing up. And when they grow up, you'll see schizophrenia. And now we're seeing dementia in people 30, 40, 50 years of age just cracking up and don't know who they are. You got tons of examples here. It's frightening to see it yourself. Incidences of leukemia in survivors of atomic bomb. So leukemia, your body is polluted with radiation. Your body attacks everything for the rest of your life, every second of your life. And it does that with white blood cells. That displaces the red blood cells, carrying oxygen nutrition. And your body's flooded with white blood cells. You become lethargic and everything else. That's called leukemia. You can get that from just eating a few meals of Japanese food. Malignant tumors and atomic bomb survivors. There's tons of studies. How did you get that if there's only external exposure? The studies refusing and that were utilized to bludgeon society with small head sizes after neural exposure to atomic radiation. Chromosomes, aberration, frequency, and cultured blood cells in relationship to radiation doses of A-bomb survivors. The effects of neutrons, which is nasty stuff, by the way. Implications for the risk estimates. Short-term effects of nuclear war, the medical legacy. You can't, like a nuclear war is a lot more, a nuclear war was Castle Bravo tests. That was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki's at the one time. It was actually a lot more than that, but we'll lowball it 1,000. The Russia's biggest bomb was equal to 3,800 Hiroshima and Nagasaki's. So imagine two countries throwing 1,900 of these bombs into one spot. That was already done. It was called the Soviet Union's Bomba blast, right? So worldwide, we detonated the animosity equivalent of 36,000 of these. 36,000. And so you see the studies on the radiation. Imagine that there was 36,000 times of this stuff released into the environment. That's not counting the fuel pools, which are hideous, absurd amounts of radiation every day. Increased somatic cell mutant frequency in atomic bomb survivors. Spontaneous immortalization of cultured skin obtained from high-dose atomic bomb survivors. High dose. What year was that? 1996. You won't see studies like that after Fukushima. Retrospective emergency dosage in response to radiological incidences, nuclear mass casualty events. Cancer mortalities among the atomic bomb survivors. Does radiation cause liver cancer? Well, in the dog studies, it certainly did. Comparisons of radiation effects on atomic bomb survivors of other populations. So, see what they're doing? Like they've got so many, they killed so many dogs in laboratories in every country you can imagine. Probably 1 trillion dead dogs alone. They talk about the blood being radiated, plutonium, mass balance released from Nagasaki bomb, applicability for future environmental research is not going to be accurate. You can't compare that to a nuclear action. You can't compare that to fuel pools. You can't compare that to the fuel waste. You can't compare it to the dumping in your lakes, your estuaries, your rivers, your streams, your oceans. All these are vicious emitters we're talking about. So you can't quantify, but that's what they're trying to do, obviously. You search for neutron reaction may be useful to Hiroshima dose reconstruction. Well, you don't need to look for it at ground zero. Go look for it at other ground zeros when you didn't build a city over it. Right? And there's a lot of studies done on these sites, which is after they happen. That information is out there. They can access it. But no, well, we couldn't find it at Hiroshima, so we can't really quantify it by saying it. But yes, you can. You had a couple of thousand nuclear detonations that you didn't build a city back on the bomb craters. So the evidence is well known and exists. So it's completely dishonest, see? To try to, and then use that to bludgeon society with. And that's what they're doing with that study there. Oh, they found it on, well, I mean, they took over 4,000 Japanese radiation victims that died back to the United States and incinerated them. And they called it ashing them. And then sniffed the ashes for radiation. Sick bastards. Risk of cancer among children exposed to the bomb. Breast cancer risk among the survivors and patients exposed to therapeutic ionizing radiation. Oh, don't even want to go down that road, folks. You wouldn't believe the adverse effects from radiation therapy. You got 8 other tumors in the next 6 months coming at you. Rays as weapons. Right, so gamma rays, neutron rays, beta rays, alpha rays, gamma shines, neutron bombardments. Rays are the pulse or the shine. Nasty. Everybody's getting full body x-rays right now from Fukushima's pulse event, all the species in particular. Is the primary event in radiation-induced a leukemia, the induction, translocation? Look, you can, like, the studies, are the amount of money they're spending on all these studies, this is only a fraction. Not even a fraction of a percent. Stomach cancer is an atomic bomb. The study of atomic bomb survivors in Japan. The first atomic bomb dropped in Japan is equal to 20,000 tons of TNT. And originally they didn't want to acknowledge radiation. Oh, it's like TNT. Surgeons at ground zero of the atomic age. Well, everybody that went in, because a lot of military went in to Nagasaki, Hiroshima, right? They all got brutally irradiated. This is why they want to deny anything, right? Because it's so far-reaching. Leukemia and thyroid carcinoma found among the A-bomb survivors. Well, the thyroids of a lot of these people were saturated with radiation, so they were also producing radioactive hormones. And that'll never stop, unfortunately. What to do if it happens? Planners, pamphlets, propaganda. It never stopped. The nuclear industry has never. Their children got the next jobs. Then their children got the next jobs. Their children got the next jobs. Current generation. Nothing in relationship. Nothing in common with the humans on the planet. Radiation injuries. All the studies were, not all of them, the majority of them were on external radiation, not internal. The ultimate insult, eh? The ultimate betrayal, really. Just one, it's contempt is the only way that you can explain it, really. They have so much contempt, disregard for all life. And a lot of them, their parents were evil, They think it's natural. They don't understand that they're even bad. They think they're good people, a lot of them, for goodness sakes. Because their parents got away with it, and their parents got away with the crimes against humanity, and their parents got away with crimes against humanity. And the list goes down that road for 80 years. Radiation injuries. Hiroshima, how much we learned nothing. You learned literally nothing. You built your cities back on a nuclear bomb crater, for goodness sakes. The effects of aging, radiation exposure, and blood pressure levels, they studied everything, didn't they? Look how many different things they studied, just this little presentation night. Studies of the acute effects of the atomic bomb. Report of a workshop on the application of the mutations in children and breast cancer, 8-year follow-up atomic bomb survivors. That never stopped. High incidences of cancer in survivors. Regulatory implications of linear non-threshold dose-based risk. So they're trying to get rid of, there's a big dedicated group of lobbying groups out there trying to get rid of linear no threshold, because man-made radiation, you get a single atom in your body, you can put 500 atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. 500 million, you can't see it. One of these anthropogenic man-made atoms sequestered in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. It's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. It's wrecking cells and DNA and chromosomes and your organs and everything. And your body's got to repair that every second. It can't keep up with it. So imagine getting a lot of this stuff in your body doing the same thing. So the people that advocate to abolish the linear no thresholds are the same ones that are trying to convince you it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine and sleeping on an airplane and climbing mountains. Original signs, symptoms in patients surviving 5 years after atomic bomb exposure under 1,000 meters. So the studies are revolting. They studied everything. Skin cancer among atomic bomb survivors. It's really something. Early onset breast cancer, retinal hemorrhaging, burn scars sustained by the survivors. Of course there was. It's just horrific. Genetic effects of atomic bombing. Statistical observation of atomic bomb cardiacs. There's a lot of studies on eyeballs, obviously. Radiation cancer, A-bomb survivors. Radiation is a weapon of mass destruction. That's Hiroshima. That's Fukushima. It's a weapon of mass destruction, right? Let's check our poll. Checking with our poll. Was it evil for the nuclear industry to rebuild Nagasaki in a nuclear bomb crater to have human lab rats? I think we quantified that. That's exactly what they done, human lab rats, right? No matter how you try, suicide selections, A-bomb survivors. Mortality among the offsprings of atomic bomb survivors. Like they studied, it's hard to comprehend how many facets it is that they actually studied. But it's really special how much they actually studied. Atomic bomb hits Nagasaki, Soviet enters the war, U.S. bids Tokyo quit. Effects of atomic bomb, radiation on the human bodies. Radiation risk in nuclear medicine. 50 years Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission Radiation Effects Research Foundation. 50 years, they were celebrating it. Silver anniversary. Their children had a job at it, and their children had jobs at it by that stage. Search for mutations affecting protein structures in children of atomic bomb survivors. Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. Mortality among the military participants at Plum Bob nuclear weapons test series, and on leukemia among the participants at the Smoky tests. Not sure how that slipped in there, but it did. Respiratory cancers incidence among the Japanese atomic bomb survivors. Long-term radiation-related effects in unique human population. And another thing to think about, so it incinerated gas stations, incinerated all kinds of chemicals, but it also atomized and aerosoled and ionized and radiated those chemicals. Right, so they changed the whole property of it and turned it into some freakish isotopes that are anthropogenic man-made. Long-term radiation-related health effects in a unique human population, lessons learned from the atomic survivors. Again, and they're going to use that to quantify putting nuclear somewhere, saying it wasn't as bad as people say. But see, nuclear fuel is different than a bomb, completely different, the emissions, and there's huge emissions. Influence of the heart rate variabilities in older adults at Hiroshima. Leukemias, lymphoma, multiple melanomas among the atomic bomb survivors. Radiation-induced cancer in atomic bomb survivors. Gastric cancers among the atomic bomb. Artery diseases, radiation exposures in atomic bomb survivors. Lifespan studies, survival cohorts, and offsprings. Significant genomic instability in breast cancer in atomic bomb survivors. They studied every facet of the lab rats. Cancer mortality in residents of terrain shield area exposed to fallout from the Nagasaki bomb. But see, the studies that they used were saying that there was no internal radiation. And they used those studies to deny the survivors for 76 years any kind of help whatsoever. The majority of them was dead, and they said, okay, we're going to give you health care. I've been protesting for 76 years. Frigate, we're going to give you some health care. How many of you left? Oh, 86. Oh, all right, okay, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we'll give you health care. Investigation, that's when they use these like authoritative grammar, remember how evil they actually are, disconnected they actually are. Glaucoma, retinal vessel diameters, and the list goes on and on and on. What I tried to do here was just show you all the different, not all, but show you a lot of different things that the academic world studied these lab rats, and these are lab rats. There's nobody can deny these are lab rats. Was it evil for the nuclear industry to rebuild Nagasaki, the nuclear bomb crater, just to have human lab rats? And when you look at all these studies, that's what they are. They're lab rats, right? They're not maybe, not almost, not what I could be. No, these are considered lab rats. And you can't keep up with how many facets, minutiae, and details of details that they studied And there's so many studies that are almost so similar, but done by different people in different years. It's really it's disappointing to see that there's a human species out there that has that much contempt for everything and everybody. You can't. I'm not going to try to cover everything, but this is a lesson. You can't trust the nuclear industry. That's the only way you can look at this. This is a lesson. You can't possibly trust the nuclear industry. They have zero redeeming qualities whatsoever. And because they studied these poor victims with just this unbelievable contempt. Vegetables and fruit intake and cancer mortality, Hiroshima lifespan. They studied everything. They missed nothing. They studied nonstop from all different countries doing their own studies. They spent probably billions and billions of dollars. There was tens of thousands of academics for the first few decades alone. Yeah. Internal, I know. Let me go back one. Internal plutonium radiation exposure. And so there's a lot of studies about not just plutonium, but other isotopes. But the official studies that they use says there wasn't enough radiation for them to be breathing it in. So all their studies, the official studies, are external doses only. But when I find all these other studies of the internal, how do I ignore that? Really, how do you ignore that? How does one ignore something so incredibly evil? Let's show some pictures maybe from today. What do we got here? Let's see what this is. Oh yeah. So you can see the nice new shiny U-joints. And there's one up on the other end. I'm not sure if that'll show up. I got more pictures. And so now I got so much electronics to do. Those two rolls, that's 18 gauge, I think. And they're 200-foot rolls each. Won't take me too long to get through all that. And those orange little chummies up there in the bag. I got a better picture of that maybe. Yeah, those things. You stick one wire on one side, one wire on the other side, and you go click. So instead of soldering everything, you can for a lot of applications you can just do that. And what a friggin' time saver that turned out to be, right? Another one I got is these sticks. So that's solder in the middle. So I got a heat gun, right? So I put a wire on each side and just hit it with the heat gun. The solder melts, and then it shrink wraps. That's pretty clever too, eh? So I got a lot of work to do on the boat. So I got that laid up on the back today. Thank God. I still got 2 to go. The red and green light to put up yet. But I got everything moved into the boat, so I'm gone hardcore at this stage. Tonight we're waiting for the Excel. It's 5:30. That's today up to I was really lucky to get them guys to do the axle for me. And so I got that installed 3 hours before I went live. Installed. I had to do it 3 times. I screwed it up 3 times in a row. And I don't think I got it, because I couldn't bring the truck up because I had the axle out. I was going to do it myself. And then I couldn't get it done because it's seized up. Now, I sprayed it last night multiple times and this morning. I still couldn't get it out. So I couldn't get them to install it for me, right? And the problem is it needs to be lined up properly, is what I discovered anyway. And so I've done the front shaft myself, which is a mistake. And now I got the back shaft done. That's a mistake. And so I'm going to have to try to find somebody tomorrow to line both of them up, hopefully, right? It's not a very big job, but you got to get it off the ground, put it in neutral, and be able to spin it. And got a torque. I got a torque. I don't have a torque wrench, so the torque setting is only 15 pounds for each one of these nuts. So it's not very. There's not a lot of poundage, right? And that matters too. Anyway, I was so happy. So incredibly happy to get that done today. The torture drove us insane. We're getting there. We'll be in the garage on Monday. James Lucid donated $320 last night, 320 Canadian. And so that was a big deal. That takes a huge amount of pressure off. Just go ahead and get things done, right? So I got to find a garage tomorrow, get it up back on the hoist and get them to center both of the axles properly. Because I butchered that, right? And then the boats, electronics, that boat's been to Alaska 6 times, right? And then it's been down here all over the place. And so the electronics is, I got to just redo all the connections, all the ground wires, all the bars, because I got bars for positive, bars for ground, but I got so much ground, some of it's just wrapped up, right? I got to get that on bars. And so a bar is just like a copper bar, but this line's got a bunch of little bolts sticking off it, and you put each one on its own bolt. And then the fuse panel, we have 3 different fuse panels. I got everything just left open because I gave up on it today. Went and grabbed that at 4:30. They still hadn't touched it. So then I had to wait until almost 6 before it was finished. It's done anyway, and we're really super happy, grateful to have that done. And so still, that makes a big difference though. Wow. One was shot completely, the other one was almost dry. So, great timing, right? We got that done. So that's it for tonight. Should have been on the other screen. That's it for tonight. I'm exhausted today. I never got in the house till almost 8. And the show starts at 10, right? So I had 2 hours. I done a bunch of work this morning, but I was gone really early trying to find a garage. Everybody's booked up, right? And I was, it's pretty stressful, right? So tomorrow I can't go running myself into the ground every day. And tomorrow I'm doing nothing. Just, I'll play around on the boat. Summer starts again, I think on Friday here or Saturday or something. Because right now it's like 9 degrees outdoors. The ocean's brutally warm, eh? The ocean's boiling, but you got to wear a coat when you're going out. Let's close the poll down. Where are we to here? Was it evil for the nuclear industry to rebuild Nagasaki in a nuclear bomb crater just so they can have human lab rats? Because that's what it was about. I agree with everybody. I think it's a very important poll. And if you go through all my videos, go to the end of the video and look at all the poles and take a screen capture. That's some, and then print that out. That's some serious education right there. That's quite the weapon, actually. So I got almost 500 presentations on this site, which is quite the feat on its own, isn't it? Like, these are mostly hour and a half, 2 hour or longer presentations, and they all got polls. So that's a 500-page book, basically, of nuclear polls. That's a pretty impressive poll. Okay, let's close the poll down. And if you make this far in the show, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Thanks for everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Tomorrow night's the last show of the week. Japan didn't have an earthquake for the anniversary. They normally have a massive earthquake in March, right? Like last year was $5 billion worth of damage. It was real earthquakes. And this year they didn't have one. So every weekend I'm waiting for this massive earthquake to happen. And we're in August, it still hasn't happened. And I feel really good. That's a big deal getting that done today for me. That's a big deal to me. So I'm super, unbelievably happy about getting that accomplished. Monday, they'll do the differential, I would imagine. Whatever the hell, they should be able to just tighten it up, because it's good for everything except when I'm going over a crest or going up a certain incline, and then they'll get some serious vibrations. And that appears to be in the differential, right? Itself. We'll know on Monday, I guess. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. See everybody tomorrow night. Oops. Blinking out there. See everybody tomorrow night. Make this far. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Hugs for everybody. See everybody on the next show. Yep. Good night, everybody. See everybody tomorrow night.